Ms. Howard, you may proceed according to our conversation.
Thank you, Robert. About 38 minutes into the videotape, Detective, you're aware that you and Detective Sprague tell Lindsay, we've talked to the doctors down at UC. Whatever happened to her happened this morning. You recall that?
Yes, ma'am.
That's not true, is that correct?
I don't know if that's true or not.
You don't know if that's true or not.
No.
Hannah wasn't even at UC Hospital, was she?
She was at Cincinnati Children's.
That's not the University of Cincinnati Hospital. That's a wholly different hospital, isn't it?
It is?
So you and the other detective who's got more years of experience on you, you're lying to Lindsay Partin at that time, correct?
I didn't pick up on him saying that. That's what he said. I'm sorry.
You didn't hear that?
Hear it. I didn't pick up on when he said it at the time, so I didn't correct him because I don't recall him saying it.
You don't recall him saying it all?
I do now, but I did not then.
So if I cue up the tape at 38:19 approximately,
I'm not disagreeing with you that he said it. I'm saying that at that time, when he said UC, I wasn't focused on him saying what hospital.
isn't it fair to say, Detective, that at that point in time, you and your detective that you're partnered with that day haven't talked to the doctor in charge of neurosurgery here, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, that's that's Dr. Stevenson, correct?
I don't know what doctor it is. I didn't speak to any of them, so I don't know what doctor did what.
You hadn't spoke to any doctors, correct?
Just the one at Fort Hamilton, and that was brief. They just let me know that she was leaving.
Okay, and in terms of that, you would agree that when Sergeant Whitlock came in to speak with Lindsay Partin, he obviously lied to her, correct?
I would assume if he didn't speak to the doctor, he wouldn't know that she had already passed. But I don't know if he spoke to the doctor or not because I wasn't with him the entire time.
Okay, so now you think it's possible that Sergeant Whitlock, who's a level above you, spoke to a doctor and was told that Hannah Weshy was dead on March 8th?
I don't know if he spoke to anyone or not. I can't say whether he did or not. He's my sergeant, so if he says that, then I'm going to go along with what he says.
Okay, so you weren't aware in the room the entirety of that interview, both coming in and going out and coming in and going out, that Hannah Weshy, in fact, did not pass away on March 8th?
Correct.
You weren't aware of that?
No, I'm aware that she did not pass away on March 8th. I know that she was still there at the hospital.
And she was alive, correct?
Yes.
And so you agree with me that you were lying to Lindsay about that the entirety of the interview after Whitlock comes in and says she's dead.
I don't know until after I am done with the interview with Lindsay of what the outcome was with Hannah, because I was in the interview room with Lindsay. Whenever any conversation was going on in regards to Hannah and what was going on there and what the doctors had to say, I wasn't in there in the room at that time.
So when Lindsay asked you towards the end about, is Jason here too? And you fumble around and finally realize, oh gosh, I can't say he's down at Children's still. Because why would he be at Children's if Hannah's passed away? You're telling this jury that you didn't know she was still alive then?
No, I had no problem with telling her Jason was still at the hospital. And she had asked if she wanted to call him, and I said he wouldn't answer.
And so Lindsay Partin leaves the sheriff's department that day believing that Hannah's passed away?
No, ma'am.
Did you tell her differently?
Sergeant Whitlock let her know. He let her know that she
I missed that in the interview. Was that in the interview?
It was cut, or it wasn't on there, but he had let her know before she left that she had not passed.
So when was that?
That was at the end. It wasn't recorded. It wasn't on the recording that we have.
Let's approach. Ms. Howard, you may proceed.
Thank you. Were you present for this conversation?
Sergeant Whitlock came back into the room, and I walked in behind him, and he let her know that Hannah was still alive at that time.
There's a video camera in that room, is that fair to say?
Yes, ma'am.
Is that the only video camera in that room?
There's only one.
Okay. And does that room have a two-way mirror also?
One of the rooms does.
What about that one?
Yes.
Do you know who was on the other side of the two-way mirror?
I do not.
Were there other detectives, sergeants, lieutenants, deputies on the other side of the two-way mirror?
Ma'am, I don't know. I wasn't in that room.
You were in and out of the room, the interview room.
I was not in that room.
You never went into the room with the two-way mirror.
No, ma'am.
Did you see lead detective Turner at the building on 3/8/18 while Miss Partin was being interviewed?
I don't recall seeing him.
You don't recall seeing him at all that day?
No.
You'd agree with me that some of the statements that you make in this updated Defense Exhibit I, the one that's just your narrative, you'd agree with me that several of those statements aren't anywhere in your other narratives, is that correct?
Yes.
And since you don't know when you created it, you don't have an idea when it was done, you can't tell the veracity of any of those statements, can you?
I can't tell you when I've typed this. Correct.
And you would agree with me that if you wrote that statement after viewing and participating in the interview on 3/8 and or the interview on 3/9 yet to be seen, that your memory can become fact inserted. You'd agree with me, correct?
It's possible.
Something that you hear on one day can be inserted into a prior day as to what happened or what was said. Would you agree with that?
I'm not going to disagree with you.
Would you agree with me that on March 8th, 2018, several of your questions, not just your questions, Detective Sprague's and Sergeant Whitlock's questions, are fishing around for information, such as about TJ, correct?
We were trying to gather as much information as we could about anyone that was involved with Hannah.
Do you know if anyone is watching the video monitor while this interview is going on?
I know Sergeant Whitlock was in there.
On the video monitor or at the two-way mirror?
The video monitor.
Lindsay told you about the problems Jason had at work on Tuesday. Do you recall that?
Yes, ma'am.
And as part of your investigative duties as a detective in this case, were you assigned to go and search out the work records related to that issue?
No.
Or any accident report related to that trailer going down the hill?
No.
You were told by Lindsay that in addition to the Tuesday issue that Jason had at work, that he also had a problem and had a fight with someone on Wednesday at work. Correct?
Yes.
As part of your duties as a detective in this case, were you assigned to go and search out any work records related to this altercation at work on Wednesday?
No, ma'am.
Were you assigned as a detective in this case to go out and obtain information about Jason almost getting fired after both the Tuesday and the Wednesday events?
No, ma'am.
Or to speak to any other witnesses about that?
No, ma'am.
Did you ask Jason if he made that statement that you don't want to mess with me?
I didn't speak to Jason.
At all?
Except for that morning at Fort Hamilton. That was the only time I spoke to him.
When he told you the 6:55?
Yes, ma'am.
When he told you he was on his way down to work when he got the call from Lindsay?
Yes, ma'am.
Lindsay told you on multiple occasions in that interview that Jason is not home a lot. Do you recall those statements?
I do.
As a detective in this case, were you assigned to go out and try to locate where Jason Weshy spent his time?
No.
As a detective in this case, were you assigned to try to obtain a consent for search of his phone to determine his location services, such as GPS, call logs, text messages?
No, ma'am.
Were you assigned as a detective in this case to obtain a search warrant for Jason Weshy's phone?
No, ma'am.
You're aware that a search warrant for a phone can obtain lots of information, are you not?
I'm aware.
Including GPS coordinates, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
In this interview, Lindsay tells you that she just thought that Hannah just bruised easily. Do you recall that?
I do.
As a detective in this case, were you assigned to go out and search out Hannah Weshy's medical records from her pediatric facility?
No, ma'am.
Are you aware, as part of your duties as a detective in this case, that her medical records indicate that she has hepatitis C?
Objection.
Approach. Ms. Howard, proceed, please.
Thank you, Your Honor. Get the documents. One second. I'll locate the name of it. I'm looking for a particular name, I apologize. I'll come up with that in a second.
There's time.
Detective Lambert, as your duties in this case, assigned as a detective, were you aware that Hannah Weshy's records from the Forest Hills Pediatrics indicated that she had hepatitis C?
No, ma'am.
Were you present for the search warrant conducted at 4004 Shank on March 8th of 2018?
No, ma'am.
Did you go into the house at 3004 Shank Road?
On March 8th?
Yes.
No, ma'am.
At any other date?
I went in there on the 9th.
And when you did so, did it appear to be well kept?
It was a bachelor pad. Single father.
Now I'm going to hand you what's marked as Defendant's Exhibit J1 through J13, that are 13 photographs. do those appear to be fair and accurate depictions of a bedroom located at this bachelor pad of Jason Weshy?
Yes, ma'am.
And do those appear to be the bedroom of a child?
There's child's clothes in that bedroom, so I would assume so.
Okay. And did you go into that bedroom when you were there on the 9th of March?
I went in very brief.
Okay. And that is what you describe as a typical single father bachelor pad?
Yes, ma'am.
It is? Permission to publish, Your Honor?
Dave?
No objection.
All right, then exhibits J1 through J13 be admitted. You may publish your one.
I'll probably just turn it off and save on.
Ms. Wilson?
I've always said I'm not technologically inclined. Mispronounce names and I can't do it. I hit this already.
Oh, you did.
And it says it's green. Oh, there was another button. There we go. Outside.
There it is.
This is the children's bedroom in this bachelor pad?
That's what I understood it to be.
Okay. A sheet, no sheets on the bed?
Correct.
Oh, I see a doll. There's a doll here. Is this why you think it's a children's room?
Yes, and all the pink clothing.
And the trash on the floor?
Mm-hmm.
And the big box in the room?
It's my understanding they were moving in.
I'm sorry, what was your understanding?
It's my understanding they were moving in there. They had just moved in.
On March of 2018?
I don't know that they moved in on that date, but he had just moved in there within the last couple of months.
That's your understanding?
That's what he led us to believe, that he had just moved in there. He still had boxes in there. He made a comment about needing sheets, and he still needed to get things but didn't have the money to get it right then.
When did he make that statement to you?
He made that statement on the 8th. He didn't make it to me. He made it to someone else, and that's what was said to me when we were in the house.
To explain the nature of the house?
Yes, ma'am.
There's a baby doll, same room, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So, defendant exhibit J2. Focus. Appears to be a closet in the same room.
Yes, ma'am.
The house that you see in the photograph, can you see the house?
Not very well. I can see a house. I just can't make out whose.
Well, are you familiar with the Shank Road area?
That day. I don't
On
go
that
out
day?
there. I don't go out there that often. No.
Okay, so you couldn't tell this jury whether that was Lindsay Partin's house or any other house in that area?
I don't know what house that would be on Shank. I can't make out the house, so I apologize.
That's okay. Defendant's exhibit J4. Sorry. Appears to be the closet. Would you agree with that?
Yes, it appears to be.
With the mattress inside?
Yes, ma'am.
J5. Same mattress, same closet, lifted up?
Yes, ma'am.
Other than the box that we've observed in the first photograph, which was J1, have you seen another moving box in this room yet? And if so, if you could point it out to me, please.
Another moving box in this room?
Yes.
I don't see one in this photo.
You indicated that Jason Weshy had told you or another detective that we just moved in and that's why my house looks like this. Do you recall that?
Yes.
And that you indicated that he told other persons or other detectives that that's why there were boxes all in the house.
Mm-hmm.
Correct?
Yes.
J6. see that?
I do.
Appears to be the closet, just the upper level,
Yes, ma'am.
with some type of, not Barbie head, but a doll head on the top shelf.
Yes, ma'am.
2 items of clothing hanging up in the closet. Correct?
Yes, ma'am.
J7. You just can't see the top shelf.
Right.
Same
Same thing.
pieces of clothing.
Yes, ma'am.
Would you agree with me that what appears to be a pink little jacket of some sort still has tags on it hanging in the closet,
Yes, ma'am.
which would appear to be a smaller child's piece of clothing?
I can't make out really what it even is.
I'll bring it to you. Do you have children, ma'am?
I do.
What ages?
16 and 18.
Objection. Relevant.
Approach. Go ahead.
Thank you. Children and how when they're younger children, they're smaller. And when they're bigger children, like 10, 15, 12, they're bigger.
Correct.
You have some familiarity with that,
I
correct?
do, yes.
You're a mom, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm going to show you, put in your, on your table there, J7. Do you see the little pink sweater hanging up on a hanger in that closet?
I do.
Does it appear to be the size of a small child's?
It does.
Okay. And do you see the black and white clothing item hanging next to it on a hanger?
Yes, ma'am.
And does that appear to be of someone larger than a small child?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. J8. Just with the door closed, the other side of the room? Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
You see the same baby doll that you saw in a prior photograph?
Yes, I do.
And the same clown, correct?
Yes.
And a big hot water heater box, correct?
Correct.
So, did you peek inside this box to see if that had moving things in it?
I didn't.
J9. Just a closer up of the box, correct?
Correct.
J10. Did you see that?
Yes, ma'am.
See the suitcase?
Yes, ma'am.
Is this what led you to believe they were moving?
No, it was told to me from another detective.
J11. Farther out video, you can see the arm of the baby doll.
Yes, ma'am.
J12. Here's someone opened up the lid of the suitcase. Same room, correct?
Yeah, I don't know who opened it. I don't know that any of us did.
See the
But yes.
pile of stuff?
Yes, ma'am.
Any of us, you mean the persons or the detectives and officers who went on the 9th of March?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm saying if it was Jason, was she himself who left the suitcase open or not?
Okay, well, let's go back to J11. Does the suitcase
It's closed, yes.
Thank you. Appears to be closed?
Yes, ma'am.
Have you had training or experience in the procedure for taking photographs of scenes?
That was part of why I was there that day.
Okay. They were training you?
In a sense, yes. There were some things that I needed to learn, so they take me out on different calls and they go over things with me.
Okay. So in terms of this, they walked you through and explained to you how they would try to take a photograph to demonstrate the entirety of a room or the entirety of the house. Is that fair to say?
Yes, ma'am.
And the importance of opening lids or opening doors and cupboards or drawers. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
We already viewed J13. 12. J13 appears to be a closer-up of that particular suitcase. Would you agree with me?
Yes, ma'am.
And having some familiarity with sizes of clothing for small children, does the clothing that is contained within the suitcase that is now open appear to be for a little girl or a larger person?
A
such as
larger
an adult?
person.
You'd agree with me that those appear to be clothing for an adult, certainly not a 3-year-old.
Correct.
Have you been in very many bachelor pads?
No.
Okay. So when you characterize this as a typical bachelor pad, could you explain to me on what experience you made that observation?
That he didn't have a lot of items in the home.
And would
He
you
was lacking cleanliness.
Would you agree with me that your opinion was also in some way influenced by the statement that someone made to one of the officers or detectives that Jason apparently said he was just moving in, he'd only been moved in a couple months?
I don't understand what you mean by that.
That the appearance of what you believe is a normal bachelor pad of a single father was influenced by the fact that you took in information that he just moved in.
Based on what he had said and when I looked at the house, there was a lot of items that were missing that he still needed, and I felt that he had just moved in.
Okay, so now it's you felt he just moved in.
No, I could see that he had just moved in. He still needed to obtain items. He stated that he had just moved in and he was still unpacking and that there were items he still needed to get.
So in the fund of knowledge you have, how long had Jason Wesche been using or utilizing the services of Lindsay Partin as a babysitter at 4050 Shank Road?
For a year.
For a year?
Yes.
And from your fund of knowledge and information, where did you believe that Jason Wesche lived for the other 10 months that he worked at the company at the end of Shank Road?
I do not know.
Is it possible, Detective, that you're misinformed as to when Mr. Wesche moved into the residence at 4004 Shank Road?
It is possible.
And would you agree with me that if Mr. Wesche had been residing at 404 Shank Road for multiple months since the summer of 2017, that the photographs contained in J1 through J13 wouldn't be a typical bachelor pad,
Correct.
as you'd been led to believe?
Correct.
When you went to the residence on March 9th for your training exercise, did you observe to be what appeared to be a marijuana pipe?
Objection, Your Honor, move to strike.
Ms. Howard, you may proceed.
Yes. Detective Lambert, where else did you see boxes in this house?
I don't recall at this time.
Did you make a note of it in any of your narratives?
No, ma'am.
You'd agree with me, ma'am, that as it relates to Defendant's Exhibit I as in Ingrid, which is this unknown, dated, prepared narrative that's not inside Detective Turner's updated report of investigations, that's the first time you write down anything about a ketchup or a mustard incident?
When I typed my narrative.
Listen to my question. You'd agree with me that that's not in any other narrative, correct?
Not in any other narrative that you had, no.
Are there other narratives?
That was my original narrative when I typed it, when I did my follow-up.
What was your original narrative?
What you have. I typed all that out, and I did not submit everything at once because I was not supposed to.
Do you mean what was marked as Defendant's Exhibit I?
Yes.
So now you remember 30 minutes later when you typed this up.
I typed everything, when I typed my follow-up, I typed everything that day.
Do you remember?
That is not new. I had to revise that.
Do you remember my original question about, as it pertained to Defendant's Exhibit I and Ingrid? Do you remember that at all, ma'am?
What was the first question?
My original question was, way back about 45 minutes ago, I asked you when was that prepared, and you said you had no idea. Do you remember that?
And I recollect that I did this all on the same day.
What happened in the last 45 minutes that made you recollect all of a sudden that you prepared that a whole year ago?
Because I had time to sit and think about what I did a year ago.
And you don't think that it was at all impacted upon things you've heard and that you don't want to be inconsistent in any of your testimony?
No, ma'am.
You don't think so at all?
No, I know that what I wrote is what was told to me.
And can you explain why Detective Turner didn't include it in his report of investigation as the lead detective in the case?
Because I gave him my brief follow-up. I did not give him my detailed follow-up.
So how long, let's go down this rabbit hole, how long have you been holding on to Defendant's Exhibit I as your narrative that you didn't give to Detective Turner?
I don't know how long until they needed the revised copy. I don't know when
Who needed it?
until we needed the revised copy. I don't know when they did the follow-up, when they looked through everything to see when I needed that.
So you didn't ever turn it over to Detective Turner? Is that your testimony now?
I submitted it, but it was not added in to the packet.
So now your testimony is that you provided it to the lead detective in this case sometime closer in time, and he chose not to include it or provide it. Is that your testimony?
It was not provided. I don't know what the reason was. It was not provided at the time, but it was later.
In March of 2019, you're aware of that, correct?
I'm not aware of when. That's what I made clear. I don't know when it was provided.
How
You're
many
telling
other-
me March 2019? I'll go with that.
How many other narratives are there that you turned over to Detective Turner that didn't get included within the report of investigation?
That was
or the
everything.
Updated report of investigation, ma'am.
You have all of my narratives, ma'am.
And how would we ever know?
I just told you. That's everything.
And do you remember when you pulled this out of your records?
I don't have it written down.
But now you remember doing it closer in time.
I do.
And how many times, you have I in front of you, can you count the number of times the word Lindsay is contained within that Defendant's Exhibit I?
Are you asking me to count
I
her
sure
name?
am. Please do so.
17.
And I'm going to hand you what was previously marked as Defendant's Exhibit H, pointing you again back to the two narratives that you said were in fact yours, beginning on what is page 2, although they're not numbered, to page 4, which up until the Christina Lewis. And count the number of times you typed in the word Lindsay, and that narrative also alleged to have occurred on March 8th. And you, I believe, already indicated that you recognize that the way in which you spelled Lindsay in the narrative that Detective Turner's used were with A's, I'm sorry, with E's. And then this, now you recall when you wrote it, new narrative, recently turned over, is correctly spelled Lindsay's name, correct?
Correct.
And you would agree with me, having both of those narratives in front of you, that the narrative that you provided to Detective Turner that he included in his updated report of investigation indicated that Lindsay told you that she fell off a toy train headfirst onto a concrete floor. Do you recall that?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And that differs from what you testified at the very beginning of your testimony when you got on the witness stand here today, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And would you agree with me that, assuming you wrote the one that's contained in Detective Turner's narrative first in time, that that would be more accurate than what you testified to here today?
I can't say that.
You can't say that? So which one is more accurate? Your memory in April of 2019 about the events and words that were said to you, or the narrative you wrote and handed in to your lead detective, Detective Turner, closer in time to April of 2018?
I explained to you that exhibit I typed the same time I typed to my other follow-up.
You explained that about 45 minutes after you first said you didn't remember.
I apologize. I didn't recall it immediately.
I'm talking about the one that's included in Detective Turner's, your
Okay.
lead detective statement. Do you see that?
I do. I have it in front of me.
Can you explain that?
I didn't put a lot of detail in that. I can explain that.
Okay. So you didn't put a lot of detail in that, even though that was going to the lead detective in the case, correct?
Correct.
At the time that this was occurring, you were 2 months on the job as a detective, correct?
Correct.
And one would presume that your training experience as a deputy, a road patrol deputy, and then your training to become a detective taught you the importance of providing your narratives to your lead detective so that he could have all the information, correct?
Correct.
Or she, if it's a lead detective female, correct?
Correct.
And you'd agree with me that nowhere in this narrative, and I'm speaking of H, as in Harry, that you wrote, nowhere does it say there's a 652 text, that you were advised of that while you were at the hospital or at the residence, correct?
Correct.
And nowhere in that narrative does it say, Lindsay tells you that Jason is usually late,
No, it does not say it.
and nowhere in that narrative does it say that Hannah asked for double kisses.
No.
You would agree with me that those statements are actually contained within the video that we just watched, correct?
Correct.
So would it be more accurate to say that the narrative you wrote on 3/8/18 isn't from going to the residence, but instead is written sometime after March 8th, whenever that was, where you used a bunch of information you'd obtained in this particular case, correct?
No, ma'am. That is not correct.
Can you explain why Detective Turner didn't want to include this more thorough Defendant's Exhibit I?
Ma'am, I don't know. I don't know that it was Detective Turner's decision.
Do you know of any other detectives in this case that have turned over items to Detective Turner and they aren't included in the
I do not.
narrative? How do you keep your narratives?
I keep them in a file on my desktop.
Okay. And do you know when you retrieved this particular one, which is Defendant's Exhibit I?
We have a follow-up that is attached to every case report that is in our system, and it stays there indefinitely.
So it's your testimony that this Defendant's Exhibit I would have been inserted into the case report as a follow-up whenever you typed it up?
Yes, ma'am.
Would it be time-stamped as to when it was?
I don't know.
You don't know enough about your system?
Ma'am, I'm not computer savvy.
You're speaking to someone like that. Does Detective Turner have access to the things that you put on your desktop that are the narratives, that are supplementals that you're talking about?
If he obtained my password, he could get it.
So
But as far as the reports,
Yes.
the follow-ups that's attached to that, he has access where he could see that, yes.
So it's your testimony that he would have been able to see this Defendant's Exhibit I because it was in your follow-up all along.
Yes.
And so if it was in your follow-up all along, he just chose to ignore it and not include it in his updated report of investigations.
I don't know what he did, ma'am. I'm not going to put words in my mouth and say that he did something or he didn't do something. I don't know. You'll have
Would
to
you
ask
agree
him.
with me, ma'am, that if it was in your follow-up and it's not contained within Detective Turner's updated report of investigations, that either he didn't put it in because he chose not to, or it's not in your follow-up?
You can elaborate however you'd like.
In the March 8th, 2018 video that we just watched, Lindsay tells you multiple times, 5 times, that she had Hannah for 30 seconds to a minute, correct?
I didn't count how many times she may have said that. I recall her saying that.
Okay, so it's not may have said it. You agree with me she said that, correct?
Yes.
And you'd agree with me that it was more than one time?
I didn't say if I know of it being more than one time, but I can tell you I know she said it at least one time.
She told you in that interview that she had Googled what to put on bruises, correct?
Yes.
And that she put vapor rub on Hannah's face?
On her chin, yes.
You don't recall her using even last night after I was putting the vapor rub on her face? You don't recall it being the word face?
She could have said that, yes.
You've watched the video 3 times?
Yes, ma'am.
You recall Lindsay telling you, I hadn't even shut the door behind me yet when she collapsed?
Yes.
If I told you it was 5 times that she used the phrase 30 seconds to a minute, would you disagree with me?
Ma'am, I will take your word for it. I don't know.
Have you had an occasion to view the interview that was then later conducted on March 9th of Ms. Partin?
No, ma'am.
You'd agree with me as it relates to Exhibit H in your narrative contained within Detective Turner's updated report of investigations, that nowhere in that does it mention the handlebar of the toy train? I'd specifically point your attention to page 3 of the updated narrative, which is H.
Go ahead.
Is that correct?
Is what correct?
Please feel free to review the entirety of your narrative contained in H.
What was the question again? Could you please
You
repeat
do
it?
not list anywhere within your narrative in H that Lindsay told you that she fell on a handlebar of
Correct.
the toy train, correct?
I did not list that, correct.
And you would agree with me that within your narrative of H, nowhere is it any explanation about the Tuesday walk outside and the fall in the gravel, correct?
Correct.
You'd agree with me, ma'am, that sometimes when things are told to you, you forget when they were said, and you might include them on an incorrect day, correct?
When I was told about the handlebar and the gravel that was at Lindsay's residence on the 8th.
But you didn't write it in your narrative,
Correct.
and we're 13 months later, correct?
You're correct.
And that's when you remember it, correct?
I remember it from that day.
But you didn't write it in your narrative?
I did not write it in.
Okay. And the demonstration you gave about how you said, Lindsay said Hannah fell on the toy train, You didn't write that in your narrative, correct?
I gave the demonstration how she said she fell taking her jacket off.
Listen, thank you. You didn't write that in your narrative, did you?
I believe I did. Just states that Hannah passed out and fell forward, striking a child's basket on the way to the ground.
Do you see anything in your narrative about how you allegedly were given some demonstration?
And I left it out, correct?
You left it out. But you have a distinct memory of it 13 months later.
Yes, ma'am.
But you took 45 minutes to decide when you might have written I, correct?
I did not recall it. Like I said, it's been a year.
13 months, actually.
Right.
One second, please.
Take your time. You're all fine. No, I'm just, I still got a little copy.
In terms of your statements that there were further conversations in the room after the tape recording was turned off, or video recording was turned off on March 8th, did they turn off the tape to conceal Sergeant Whitlock telling her that she
Ma'am,
wasn't dead?
I don't know why they turned it off or why we don't have the video. I am not aware of why.
Do you know who was present when that was done?
I do not.
Were you in the room?
I was not in that room.
So how did you know about it?
Know about what?
That Sergeant Whitlock went into the room to talk to Miss Partin again?
I was there in the hallway right by the door when he went in there to let her know that. I was not in the room where the video was being recorded where someone turned it off. If it was turned off or if the video just didn't upload, I don't know what the reason is why it's not recorded.
And how long did that interaction between Sergeant Whitlock and,
It was very brief and she left.
what's very brief to you?
Very brief, a minute and a half.
Any reason why it's not contained within your narrative report?
No, ma'am.
You said you were outside in the hallway.
No, ma'am. I didn't document it.
One more topic. You recall within the testimony, within the videotape that there are various times when Detective Sprague or Sergeant Whitlock lies to Lindsay Partin, correct?
Correct.
Including the statement at about 1:11. Actually, you say it. Where you tell Lindsay Partin, you agree with me that you're the female detective, correct?
Yes,
In that
ma'am.
room. That's pretty easy.
Yes, ma'am.
That you tell Lindsay Partin, Jason is telling us that she gets hurt a lot at your house. She always comes home with bruises. Recall that?
I do?
That was a lie, correct?
No.
When did he tell you that?
He told us that morning.
At Fort Hamilton Hospital?
He said that when he was talking to Detective Sprague.
And did you hear him also tell him that Hannah told him how she got the bruise?
I heard Jason tell Detective Sprague that Hannah told him that she fell down on the step. But he said that he wasn't sure which step.
And that's what you were referencing in that statement in
Yes,
the
ma'am.
interview?
Yes, ma'am.
No further questions, thank you.
Okay, Ms. Howard?
Sorry, I have a lot of stuff.
That's all right. Take your time.
Do you need these?
You can leave them there. Okay.
Is she in redirect?
Not at this time, thank you.
All right. Is this witness potentially subject to recall?
No, thank you.
All right. Detective, you are discharged from your subpoena. You are free to leave. Please do not discuss your testimony with any other anticipated witnesses, please.
Thank you.
And watch your step. Let's approach real quick, please. Ladies and gentlemen, it is 5:31. We are going to recess for the night, so please leave your lanyards and your notepads. Also, please be mindful of your admonitions. Now, I'm going to, we're trying to keep future scheduling in mind for potentially next week. I'm going to ask that we vary our schedule a little bit just to try to gain some ground here. If you guys can be up here about 8:15 and try to get started about 8:30, I know a half hour might not sound like much, but I want to try to gain as much daylight as we can in terms of the testimony. Anyone have any? Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry.
My son was going to get on
7:51?
the bus until 8 o'clock at the earliest.
Okay. Well, everybody else can be, hold on. 102?
43. Same situation.
Okay. Anybody else with that type of a situation? 43, what's the earliest you think you could be here by? Realistically, I mean,
8:30.
7:51?
Same.
Okay. So let's gun for 8:30, do your best, don't get into any accidents or break any, traffic laws, but as soon as we get everybody here, we will get started prompt on the dot, okay? So we'll try to accomplish that as early as possible. All right, folks, you guys are good to go home, thank you.
Scare me, I was like,
48-year-old need to smoke. Good evening, folks. Thank you so much for your hard work. I appreciate it.
Night, thank you.
Night, gang.
thank
Thank you.
We're off.
All right, attorneys, the jury's gone. Anything you wish to discuss on the record tonight or anything we can't wait till the morning?
Nothing we have to say.
Just to reiterate, if we need to break in between witnesses to get Macroff on, we certainly understand the necessity for that.
I appreciate that, thank you.
Well, we will certainly work as we're going along to try to make sure that everything's accommodated and try to get this as efficient as possible tomorrow. So I am mindful of that and just, we'll stay in constant communication to make sure all that happens. So otherwise, good night, everybody.
Thank you, Your Honor.